Okay, starting a new recording now that we got some technical issues worked out. Again, please interrupt frequently, and I'm going to start the video over again. Sharing now. Hello, everybody. I'm going to give you an overview, and I'll go into a little more depth than that on a few topics of the broad general topic of what my proposal is to the world. And I invite you to join me in making this our proposal to the world, that for starters, we start off by ensuring that we feed everyone using a planetary collective superintelligence in which we get a majority of humanity participating in one form or another. I'll talk about kind of some of the origins of this and some big picture stuff, and then I'll get into some details as to how this could actually work, how there could be this coevolution between collective superintelligence and feeding everyone, right? And then other derivative benefits like the fact that we end pandemics through this process, and that it sets humanity on a course where now, with this exponentially growing collective superintelligence, we'll be able to finally cool the planet using planetary scale solar radiation management, or SRM. All right, so with that, I'm going to spend probably most of the rest of the video on screen share, though I'll pop back and forth. And I'll pause recording from time to time. And hopefully I won't keep you too long. I'll try to make this concise. So with that, I will screen share some slides I've prepared. So first of all, I will present two different pathways to get to a whole world. And just briefly, what do I mean by a whole world? In the lower right-hand corner, I have an image of it. It's basically a world that works for all people and for all species, ecosystems, and Mother Earth as a whole. And I talk about a direct pathway. One of the two pathways to get to a whole world, one I'm just going to call the direct, which is basically have the conversation which spans all of this, which includes evolving into an exponentially growing collective superintelligence, humanity evolving into a CSI for short, which will enable us to develop and continuously update the strategy and the plan. The strategy probably won't get updated too frequently, but the plan will be updated continuously as conditions change and evolve, all with a view to saving life on Earth. I talk about saving, healing, and transforming life on Earth. We first must save the patient and then heal the patient. That's a longer process, and ultimately transform. So that's the direct pathway. So if that's the direct pathway, another pathway is indirect, which is to take kind of a detour from the holistic goal of solving all of the world's most daunting problems, including pandemics, exponential planetary overheating, the destruction of the biosphere, sixth mass extinction, the melting of the ice, the wildfires, just this house of horrors that we're now inhabiting. So instead of focusing on that as a whole, which is a really pretty big ball of wax to focus on all at once, the indirect pathway, what I'm calling the indirect pathway, does a detour and focuses just on feeding everyone, for starters, using collective intelligence, using essentially our present capabilities for organizing ourselves and applying our collective intelligence to a problem. Now, over time, as we address feeding everyone, for multiple reasons, but we really don't need to dig very deep. But among them are included, notably, that by feeding everyone, we end pandemics, and more on that in other videos where we go deep into it. But in the process of doing this, we evolve from collective intelligence to collective superintelligence. And once we have collective superintelligence, now it starts to look more like the original direct pathway, right? From CSI to strategy and plan to whole world. But here we're talking about taking essentially this indirect path, focusing on feeding everyone, and experiencing multiple derivative benefits from that, including ending pandemics and evolving collective superintelligence very, very quickly, because I believe this can be, by this issue of feeding everyone, this opportunity to feed everyone, will draw in people much more quickly than any other conversation, particularly with the impacts on pandemics, ending pandemics, eradicating pandemics, including all potential future pandemics. This is the key. Again, more on that in other videos. But basically, with CSI, we get a complete strategy and plan toward a whole world. And I call this this is one possible indirect pathway. There's multiple possible pathways. I argue that this is the most powerful one for a number of reasons. All right, let's delve into this particular pathway focused on feeding everyone. But first, let's take a little bit of a broad view of whole world. As I mentioned previously, wholeness for people and wholeness for the planet. And one strategy is to break this down into its component topics, and this is a process where you keep rooting down and keep rooting down. And the following is very conceptual. It's certainly not sufficiently detailed, but just to show where food lives relative to the others in a very general sense. And so, with this indirect pathway, taking a major detour to focus just on feeding everyone, imagine that we fan out this taxonomy and cover all geographies and go into depth, and there would probably be millions easily of these, what I would call leaf nodes topics, which are really all the different communities in the world, right? Hundreds of millions if you consider at the level of neighborhood and whatnot, and so, or these at a minimum tens of millions. So here, think of all these as like essentially the geographical divisions in which people are congregated. ultimately, to take it to an extreme, there would be 8 billion leaf node needs, one for each person. And that's becoming more and more a very real possibility to be able to tailor this to each individual. But that's going to an extreme. Let's dial it back and just come back to communities like cities and towns and rural areas, etc. Okay, that's on this kind of horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis would be topics that are general, that are not confined to a specific location, but apply all over the world. All right. This is just a sampling of, some of the bigger ones. And so what's interesting then is if you essentially mash the two up and say, okay, for each specific geography, for each city, for each town, we need to deal with all these topics, right? And so you can envision a matrix spanning basically every intersection between a non-geography based general topic pertaining to feeding everyone and a specific geography. At each intersection, you can imagine there being literally a conversation. And when I say a conversation, I'm talking about some form of mashup between synchronous conversations via video conference, via Zoom, for example, versus asynchronous, like via Reddit, a Reddit thread. And both can coexist as well as myriad other forms. The point is that we have a network of conversations that spans all relevant topics applied to all geographies. And now, initially, we're going to probably start with a much coarser matrix, right? For example, for each continent, we're going to have, a working group talking about the application of all these different assets and tools and et cetera to the problem and coming up with their own solutions. And then, once that's kind of figured out at a very high level, then you go into more detail. Okay, that's fine. Well, right now, what level of detail are we at? We're actually at this super high level of detail where we're talking about for the whole world what exactly we need to do. So here we do have a number of different topics that we go into, but it's all happening within one single conversation, which is the Collective Intelligence Block Party and the Solution Club. So, here we are. This is the current state of the conversation. It's one video conference room, not, 10,000 or 10 million or whatever. But we're starting here with the faith that as we build, as more and more people join the conversation, including the big conversation that I showed initially, which spans the full stack from, from collective intelligence, ending hunger, all the way through to a whole world in all of its detail. Anyway, so focusing on ending hunger, this is a community cafe, our first community cafe project that we did in Southern California, feeding an entire community for free. That once we imagine this like all over the world, that was our vision actually, was to put these all over the world. Now with the pandemic, it's essentially the same model, but delivered to your home. So it's community cafe on wheels, basically. And we believe that this is something that makes people feel so good. I mean, just look at the picture. Everyone's smiling. Even the guys who are trying to look tough are smiling. And there are actually some pretty tough folks there. But anyway, this draws everyone in. It becomes a game. It becomes a challenge. It becomes a mission that everyone falls in love with. And so it becomes a virtuous cycle as the story grows, and as we see it as a way of bringing people together so that we end violence and end the very foundations of violence, which is suffering and deprivation. With the Hungerless Games, we get rid of all that. And once we've done that, then we can go on to many other things, solving many other problems and addressing other opportunities, like the opportunity to cool our planet through solar radiation management. That's a real biggie. I mean, that's where we need to get to very quickly after we've addressed making sure everyone has plenty to eat. All right, so getting back into the topic of feeding everyone, let's look at a couple of details. First of all, regarding government and governance, two different things, very overlapping. But governance, for example, includes community organization and, governance, communities basically governing themselves as regards food production and distribution. You see, food is going to become much more local, right? We've all heard stories going back into the 80s and 90s about, food miles and all that, and how food gets transported all over the place. Well, it's becoming much more local by necessity. And that requires a new level of governance. And in terms of local, when I was in Shanghai in 2006, 2007, while I was working for Microsoft, it was amazing that in this mega city of, pushing 20 million people or whatever, where it's extremely, densely populated, everything's built out. Nonetheless, wherever there's even, a couple hundred square feet of empty space or soil or whatever, there you'll see little greenhouses in the winter, and they'll be growing produce, and they do it so intensively that it's something on the order of 30% or something like that, maybe even more, of the produce that is consumed in Shanghai is actually grown in Shanghai. So just amazing. And anyway, or at least that was the data point back in 2006, 2007. But I digress. My point is that we can produce so much food, even in a densely populated urban environment, through these different, vehicles. And, each of these fans out into many different subtopics. I mean, look at just, for example, windowsill gardens, right? There's so many specific subtopics related to safety, to viability, depending on the environment, to related to cold weather and freezing, and what do you need to do to mitigate that? What specific varieties to grow, and of course this all varies with climate and all different factors, direct sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course there's indoor hydroponics. I mean, there's just so many different topics to master in order for us to ensure that everyone is fed, even in the face of such challenging times that we're facing. And that's really where collective super intelligence, not just collective intelligence, but collective super intelligence comes in as so many people jump in to participate, to join this movement, to come together to ensure that everyone has plenty to eat. There's really nothing more urgent for us to do right now, because we simply cannot afford on any level letting people starve, and certainly not in any numbers. I mean, even if one person is starving, let's feed them. But tens of millions, hundreds of millions, this is ridiculous, and it could get much, much worse if we let it. So anyway, all I'm saying is, in the face of such obvious, urgent, wicked problems threatening our survival in the very near term, there's no other game in town but coming together and solving our problems. And I'm arguing, hopefully convincingly, that this combination of ending hunger and going collectively super intelligent at the same time, right? Collective intelligence becomes sort of the starter motor for this process. And then it picks up steam as it becomes massively popular. That's the Hungerless Games virtuous cycle I was talking about earlier. And that draws in so many people that we really tap.
I'm pausing because I see, So, you have your hand raised. Go for it, So.
You didn't specifically include sanitation and water in your list.
Yeah, very good. So I start with feeding everyone, just because that's the most basic, and along with that, obviously water is included, right? And the much harder thing to provision to a community that's under any kind of stress, food is the critical resource. It's certainly water is a bit heavier, but it's anyway, it's much more readily available than food. It takes water to grow food, for example. So, and then sanitation, shelter, hygiene, healthcare, these are all other basic needs. But if I could only choose one thing to offer everyone, it would be food and water, right? Without food and water, there's no life. And anyway, so I'm just starting with that, but absolutely we need to include all these other elements in the whole solution. So it's kind of more like a starting point. Remember I said it's sort of a detour because we just kind of narrow our focus to that one thing, but then expand from there, because that becomes the virtuous cycle under which collective superintelligence and feeding everyone can co-evolve. And as collective superintelligence ratchets up in that process, it will then be able to expand its purview to virtually everything, solar radiation management, cooling the planet, providing healthcare, you name it. There's nothing we can't accomplish if we put our heads together. Anyway, I'm going to go on mute and see if there's any more questions or comments.
Well, I'll just respond to that and say like that water, although it is becoming shorter, like in they say like, that there's shortages of water, blah, blah, blah. But if you think about it, that's only a matter of applying ourselves to, like, there's been ancient technology out there where they can collect and preserve water in the Dead Sea, you know what I mean, in the mountains of the Dead Sea, in giant underground cisterns. Like, there's loads of ways of dealing with that. And in cities, all you have to do in cities is have rain collection systems that'll run it off into tanks and what have you. You can water your garden when it rains by having the rain channeled off into the garden itself. There's loads of ways around all that, so that's a no-brainer when it comes to city farming anyway.
Very good. Thank you, James. Absolutely. All right. Any other comments before I resume?
And the sanitation links to farming, you know, like we're totally wasteful with our sanitation and our excrement. It's not being used as fertilizer. There are plenty, well, they already exist. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There is loads of sustainable ways of using our bodily waste for the farming and to make the vegetation more profuse.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually something I'm quite passionate about myself, is the upcycling of excrement for agricultural purposes. Now, how do you do that safely, et cetera, and at scale? Take like London. There's a lot of people, not a lot of arable land. So the ratio of potential fertilizer to soil that can take it is pretty high. So I'm just saying.
But Jamin,
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned before. At one time in London, it's not that many hundreds of years ago, the pot was just thrown out the window on top of people's heads, regardless of what was in it. So we upscaled. We've got a model in history of a massive leap forward. So we've just got to think in terms of all these outdated systems that we've got. We have to make that great leap forward. Sorry to use Chairman Mao's term. And we, you know, it has been done, therefore it can be done, and therefore it can be done better.
Absolutely, no question. And that's what collective superintelligence is all about. How do we max out our acceleration towards better, including better ways of cooling the planet, et cetera. Anyway, so good stuff. Love the conversation. Any more comments, questions before I resume? Alrighty, with that, I will carry on with the video. And everyone, please feel free to just speak up. I appreciate you raising your hand, but when I'm screen sharing, it's harder for me to see that. So anyway, just feel free to speak up. All right, going on mute and continuing to share the video.
Up into this almost magical force of collective superintelligence, which I talk about in depth along with other colleagues in the 30-minute segment on collective superintelligence, which I link to below. And there we talk about a lot of different scenarios, and it's kind of data and algorithm centric. On the more personal side, I recommend a separate video, which is 45 minutes long, which I also link to below in this, referring to this email. If you want to get all this full information, please sign up on radish.org. It's there's no cost. It's a gift we give to the world, and you'll be put on the email list. You can opt out anytime. And anyway, that's how to get up to date on everything. So in the email further below, I've got links to those videos and to some other stuff. And there's a fair amount of text there, including all the notes for this particular presentation, which is pretty extensive. It's like, I don't know, well over a dozen pages or something like that. Anyway, so back to the collective intelligence part of it. This is collective intelligence. This is collective superintelligence, particularly as we talk about in the 30-minute video. What happens is that while some people are specialized in very specific niche topic intersections, others are much more general and more broad, and including the leadership, which is emergent and totally decentralized, and, you know, holacracy, sociocracy. These are topics we can get into in terms of governance and all that, but but it's basically just, common sense, radical inclusivity and radical equality, and, letting everyone have their opportunity to speak and share and contribute. And in this process, as we evolve to become very, very targeted to making sure everyone in every geography has ample nutrition, abundant, good nutrition through 100% plant-based, immune-boosting diets delivered to everyone's homes by the community itself. As we develop all this expertise and know-how and experience, folks from different areas will be able to help folks from other areas across, a common topic, like rooftop gardens, whether in the United States, Mexico, Canada, or Europe. There's certain things that, you need to know about rooftop gardens, and there's certain best practices, and, depending on the climate, there's all this knowledge about what works well. Anyway, I can go on and on. Let me just pause for a moment. All right. So earlier I was talking about solar radiation management, that we very quickly need to get to the place where we're rolling this out at massive scale. And in many ways, I see that as a much harder problem than ensuring that everyone has plenty to eat. Not so much logistically or engineering-wise, but more socially, culturally, politically. The bottom line is that humanity is having a really, really hard time collectively grappling with and taking responsibility for all the destruction we've caused, and the imperative to save life, heal life, and transform life on Earth, starting with transforming ourselves with great urgency. And also, coming to terms with, the bigger picture and what we need to do, which is some heavy duty solar radiation management on the order of millions of square miles of reflectivity. We're talking about a very small percentage, but 2%, 3%, I don't know the exact figure. I don't know that anyone knows at this point. And that's part of the problem, is that no one on their own has the big picture. No individual, no organization, no group. We literally need collective intelligence in order to make sense of all this. And again, I refer to the 30-minute video that I linked to below for more on that. And so the problems that we need to solve, or the solutions that we need to come up with for SRM, are really really varied, and many of which represent just totally new terrain for humanity. So something that would normally take us maybe years or decades to get comfortable with, we're going to need to get collectively comfortable with in a matter of months. And that simply requires collective superintelligence. There's no other way to get there. And, we keep, hiding from, distracting ourselves from, going around in endless circles of debate, pointless debate, and pretending that we don't have all the information that we need in order to really have sufficient understanding that we can actually take meaningful action. What do we always hear? Well, more study and research is recommended. We've been doing study and research pretty intensively on this for over half a century. What's it going to take? And the bottom line is that humanity is going to require some serious convincing in order to come to terms with the reality of the absolute urgency for planetary scale SRM. And basically, the three huge pills to swallow are the magnitude of the problem is so great that we caused it, and third, that we can solve it. And that third one may be the biggest of all because it implies a noblesse oblige, you know, because we can, we must solve it. And which then leads us to a fourth big pill to swallow, which is overcoming our fear of failure. As a species, we've developed quite an inferiority complex as we're becoming more and more aware of just how much destruction we've caused and how badly we've screwed up. And we are also screwed up in the head. We need to come to terms with that too, partly because of the addiction to money and ego and buying into this story of separation. So one of the things that we need, among many others, is a massive dose of compassionate and loving group therapy, which we get through video conferencing, through Zoom, for example. And there's lots more to say about that. And again, I recommend the 30-minute and the 45-minute videos below. Let's see. You know, I showed on the slides the grid about hunger and geography and these topics and all that. Well, same thing applies to climate, to the biosphere, to the melting of ice, the refreezing of ice. There's this whole grid of specific topics and intersections between topics, all of which need to be mastered. And, you know, that's one of the good things about having 8 billion people on the planet is there's a lot of expertise and a lot of, you know, exotic combinations of expertise and whatnot. And as we talk about in the 30-minute video, one of the things we need to get good at is figuring out the right combinations of expertise or experience or background or whatnot in order to be successful in coming up with solutions very quickly or components of solutions. Let's see. And what I really want to emphasize, and this is going to then bring it back full circle to the whole big picture, you know, full stack as I call it, and I'll share slides for that as well. Actually, I think I've got slides. Let me check. Okay, yeah, we've got some good slides for this. So screen sharing here. So with an initial intense focus on ensuring that we feed everyone, community cafes on wheels, the Hungerless Games. Now, we quickly pivot from there to solar radiation management for the simple reason that our goal is not just to feed everyone for 1 meal or 10 meals or 6 months or no, ongoingly. I mean, like for the rest of time. And so we need to have a world that supports the growth of plants. And to have that, we need to have a planet that does not continue on the omnicidal exponential overheating trajectory. We need to stop that. And the only way to do it in time is with SRM, planetary scale, as I keep mentioning. So there's this initial dual focus on feeding everyone and collective superintelligence. The collective superintelligence that we evolve in the process of feeding everyone will give us the potential to do the SRM so that we can actually have a livable planet. But in summary, this initial dual focus ultimately addresses, and very quickly, our need for food, our need to unite as a species, especially in the face of extinction, potential extinction. if you ask Guy McPherson, near certain extinction, our need to be free from crippling, deadly pandemics, our need to live on a livable planet, right? So what I'm proposing is that in the process of taking this detour, which really enables collective intelligence to rapidly mature into collective superintelligence, at that point, which we're still very far from, but we can cover a lot of ground very quickly if we just hop to it and do it. Again, please join radish.org so that you can have just full access to everything you need. The collective superintelligence will come up with the complete strategy and plan, right, to get us to a whole world. So right now, that's just, I mean, we can speculate all we want, but the reality is, until we have collective superintelligence, feeding everyone, cooling the planet, right, and continuing to evolve and grow, because really there's no limit to collective superintelligence if you consider all the facets that we talk about in the 30-minute video. So really, we're just focused on, the first part of the pathway, the first, few major milestones, right? Getting enough people into this conversation, this full stack conversation, including this possible, detour, this other possible detour. Hey, maybe we do several detours in parallel, whatever, right? Anyway, so with that, let me pause for a second. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I'm complete. Please make sure you watch the videos below, and look forward to seeing you on either the Collective Intelligence Block Party or the Solution Club. Full details on radish.org. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.
All righty. That's it. That's the 35-minute video recorded late last night. I would love to hear comments, questions, feedback, what was missing, what was redundant, what did I spend too much time on, what did I not spend enough time on, what was totally missing, what was there that shouldn't have been there, etc. Going on mute. Now, please, don't all talk at once. Give others a chance to talk too. Yeah.
Well, I think you covered everything, and as far as I'm concerned, like as briefly as you could in that 35. It didn't seem like 35 minutes, to be honest. Like we're all sitting here, we have an idea what you're talking about, you see. But to the average person, it's a vast kind of a ordeal or undertaking. But we know that ourselves anyway. Blah blah blah. I don't know what I'm saying here now. I think you covered the majority of it anyway. There's a lot there, so there's a lot that I couldn't pick out anything that I could say there was anything wrong with anyway. Like put it that way. Like. So. Probably the reason why there's not many people making a comment at the moment. I didn't see anything wrong with it. The only thing I see, like, and there's not wrong with it, is what I just said at the start. Like, where the plan starts off with the conversation, the collective intelligence, the CSI, and then the strategies and plans and everything else. I see that all makes sense and everything else, but we're again now going back to the conversation, because that is where we are at the moment. Like we're still trying to gather the conversation. We're having the conversation. We do it every week, but it's again just one primary thing now that we need to focus on is getting the heads into the conversation. So that's the only thing I can pick out of what I think you covered it all. It's a great it seems like a vast undertaking, but we know that's what it is. Yet we also know that it can be done. You know what I mean? But it's getting people on board now with the conversation. That's the biggest issue I can see in it. The rest can all be built on.
Great. Thank you, James. Thank you. Looks like So and Emery are both attending to food needs at the moment, which is good. Yeah, thank you, James. I really appreciate that. And that's why you said it didn't seem like 35 minutes. I assume you meant it felt like it was less time, right? And if that's the case,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. It felt a lot shorter than 35 minutes. When you were saying it's 35 minutes long, to some people when they hear that, they start going, "Oh God, this is going on for 35 minutes." But it didn't seem like about 10, 15 minutes.
Thank you. That's a great compliment. That's a really good sign because it says that it's flowing, right? That's great. Thank you, James. Yeah, and one of the reasons that I made that video is precisely so that others could watch it and take it as an invitation to jump in. It's one possible starting point. Here we are at the mountainside in Lord of the Rings, groping for the keyhole. I'm just saying, hey, this looks like a keyhole. What do you all think? Shall we give it a try? Well, it takes a pretty big key. We all need to lift the key together, and we all need to put it in together, right? And that's why for me it all starts with the conversation. What is our goal? What's our strategy? And for me, one of the biggest failures of humanity is that in the year 2020, right, almost a freaking century of computers. We've had computers for almost a century now, longer if you consider the mechanical, computing machines put together in the 1800s and whatnot. But no matter how you slice it, we've had computation for over a century. And, the last half century, or longer, more than 50 years, we've had incredible communication, networks. We were able to watch people landing on the moon essentially in real time, right? In real time, however many seconds it took for the speed of light to travel from moon to the earth was our delay, plus, switching times and whatnot. But you get my point. One of the biggest failings is that in awash in so much technology and communication, in 2020, with all that's going on, we are not gathered around having the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. With the amount of technology and the amount of communication available to us, we still have never been further apart from each other.
And with
all the conversation on social media networks, it's all bullshit, stupid, unimportant bullshit. Whether people like to distract themselves or whether they're just, it doesn't matter. It's all bullshit. Unless you have meaningful conversation with direction, it's all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, no, it's all great. It's great to have social media and it's great to have polite conversation, but not when the fucking world is falling around on top of you, like.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. It's kind of like we're, a bunch of heroin addicts sitting in the living room with heroin needles hanging out of our arms, just going, yeah, I feel good. And the house is on fire and there's babies up in the attic, coughing from smoke who need our help. And we're just like, yeah, I smell smoke, but whatever, it'll pass. It's a cyclical thing. You smell smoke, then you don't smell smoke. Where's my heroin needle? And I'm also getting the munchies real bad. What? That's the analogy here. This is our home. Here we are sitting in our home, watching it go up in smoke. And look, I'm not saying oh, it's immediately obvious what we need to do. One thing is immediately obvious. We need to have a conversation about it. We need to talk about the smoke in the living room and the babies in the attic. We need to at least talk about it. Acknowledge that it exists. It's barely happening. We talk about specific things, right? Police brutality. We talk about the pandemic. We talk about the economy. We talk about this. We talk about that. We talk about having to go around everywhere in masks, right? Can we talk about the elephant in the room? That we're going down in a really severe death spiral, and that it's going to take some really, big problems call for big solutions. Mega problems call for mega solutions. Let's have the conversation. Which can we deploy in time? Which is it going to take? Will it take SRM, or is it enough that we all go vegan, right? Or that we all stop, polluting so much? What's it going to take? Let's have the conversation, but as a collective intelligence, so that we can make sense of it from all the different perspectives in an integrated way. And again, I emphasize the 30-minute video that I keep pointing to. That's on the collective intelligence page on radish.org, by the way. But I'll try to include the link here if I remember. But it's just getting to a point where the obviousness of this is painful. It's obvious we need to have a conversation. What the hell is taking people so long? Right? Join us. Even if you don't think you have anything to contribute, I guarantee you do, just by your very presence. Hey, welcome back. So I know you needed to go to the store before it shut. I assume you missed some of the video then.
I did, but it's recorded, so I'll be able to watch it. What? Could you give me a resume of brief? What you said?
Yeah. Happy to. In fact, let me just play the last few minutes of the video because it's got some visuals that I actually don't have on this computer, but that are just on the video. So let me do that. Do you remember roughly where we were at in the video? So actually, you know what? I can look up on. Huh?
We've just been talking about sanitation. And then we were about to start playing it again.
Oh, okay.
So, sanitation and upgrading to a new system, a waste-free system.
Gotcha. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pause recording just so that folks who've watched it already don't have to rewatch it. We'll rewatch maybe the last half, and then when it's time for us to converse, somebody remind me to keep recording, okay? And we're live streaming continuous. So pausing for a moment. Okay, carry on. So after a brief pause in recording, go for it. Mm-hmm.
I liked that you laying it all down in a list because it enabled thinking. Like my instinct is to shit. It's a list. I'm off. And that is not why I went to the shop. I swear to you. But the list actually really enabled my thinking on it. How it's all intersectionality, isn't it? I mean, the food, the growing, the sanitation, the waste, the pandemics and the sanitation, all these that it's all totally linked. The cooling of the planet and the growing of the food in the cities, the green wars, all that is a cooling thing. It's all cooling, Ye's geoengineering solutions apart, which we probably will need as well. but it's all intersecting, and when it's all intersecting, we have the integral, we have the whole, which is what we need. But I found it helped facilitate my thinking to see how you laid it down. Although, like I say, I have a natural prejudice against this, but it was actually very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, and can you tell me again what that prejudice was against, your natural prejudice?
I'm not somebody who makes a list, but they are very useful because they pin things down. You know, it's just probably a bad habit on my part that I don't like laying it down. I do lay things down, except that my lists are poem lists. So they are lists because they are honed thoughts in 5 or 6 lines. So it's just that I have another version of a list. But your list is far more universal of a language. Well, I don't know, poetry is supposed to be a universal language, but it's more accessible to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I found I mean, I found myself talking about so many of these things. I said, it's like, you know what, it's time to put this down in a form that's visual. And I like Emery's comments. Let's see, the intersectionality, crossroads of topics, and then asks about ACE. I'll cover ACE in a moment, but so I really liked, you know, the topics that are independent of geography crossed with all the geographies. That's what creates this massive intersectionality, right? And ACE is accelerated collective evolution. I purposely took that out of the slides just so I wouldn't clutter it anymore, but really CSI is part of a larger ACE, accelerated collective evolution, which goes so far beyond the intellectual, the logical, etc., into the spiritual, the transformational.
You know, the reason I like engineering is because you've got the smarts, you've got the intelligence, and then it's applied, and then you've got the mechanics of it, because it's up there in the head, but it's always being made real. It's always being brought down and actualized. That's why I think I love, you know, I've watched a lot of YouTube vids on sanitation and sanitary engineering, biomass digesters, different things like that. I'm going to make one for my kitchen, an indoor biomass digester, but I haven't got around to it yet because, as I told you, I'm a big procrastinator. But you know, I love everything to be earthed, to be brought down. You know, I don't like ivory towers, and that's why the engineer is the hero, you know, or the heroine it's it to me, the engineer.
Yeah, what you're saying to me parallels the concept of the philosopher king, right? Prior to which, you know, there were philosophers and there were kings, and they were separate until, I don't know if it was Marcus Aurelius or whoever came up with the concept of the philosopher king that says, really, you need to be both. And the engineer is sort of like a philosopher king. You've got the science, which is the philosophy. Well, in theory, this should happen. But then it's like, okay, I'm a king with real power. Let me exercise that power. Let me exercise that knowledge, that theory, that science, that philosophy in real world, real life. Anyway, I hope that resonates. All right. Well, beautiful. Really great feedback. And, you know, it feels to me that as we make this more clear, concise, compelling, visual, you know, that's why I made that video. And my intent with that is that it be the first of a series, that each of which covers fundamentally the same thing. We just refine it and refine it and refine it, right? in a way, maybe roughly analogous to how, 50 years ago we had computers, 75 years ago we had computers, giant clunky things. Emery, I see you got your hand up. I'll call you in a sec. And, now 75 years later, that is all dwarfed by the power of something I can just put in my pocket and lasts for a couple days if I stretch it on a single charge, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we need to refine it and refine it and refine it until it's like a handheld iPhone that's just like, I get it now. I can scroll, I can do this, I can do that, FaceTime, whatever, right? We need to make this message that compelling that people say, you know what, I just like this, I gotta have that iPhone, I gotta have that story, and I gotta be a part of it, and I gotta see myself in it. I need to actually hold the iPhone as opposed to just watch other people holding it, that kind of thing. All right, with that, I'm complete. Going on mute, and Emery, go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering, Jamin, would you consider doing an ebook, perhaps? Like a talking ebook, some kind of ebook. Some people are more keen on books for some reason. So there's a market to look at there, or a segment of the population, right? They like their ebook. They like to download it. So you could put it on ebook. Some kind of a set.
Jamin, while you were talking, I was preoccupied with engineering, and you talked about, the philosopher King. I suddenly came up with a term I liked, which was intelligence drawdown. So on YouTube, you've got every type of expertise going, and these people are marvelous because they're marvelous teachers, a lot of them. You can take any subject. There'll be weaker teachers and there'll be stronger teachers. You find the one you like. It could be anything from how to use your bodily waste to grow your kitchen garden, to how to grow this, how to make a fruit forest, anything. So in a sense, that is already collective intelligence. But what we really need is scaled up drawdown of that intelligence into actualization. So I like the term intelligence drawdown. I like it. I don't know whether anyone else likes it.
Now, the drawdown, tell me more about the drawdown. I know about the drawdown of carbon, but do you mean that or something else?
I mean drawdown in terms of making it the drawdown to do with the carbon is to suck it out of the atmosphere and bury it in some way in the planet, and various ideas come up. So using the term drawdown, which is a current term, and talking about intelligence drawdown, it's, there are so many smart people out there. They're really smart, and a lot of people are in their ivory towers. A lot of the professors have come out of their ivory towers, and they're living it. A lot of the Extinction Rebellion people are academics, actually, and they've stepped out and they're bringing it onto the ground. They're drawing it down, this intelligence, into the real. So for me, I just like the term intelligence drawdown.
Like drawing it down to earth, bringing it down to earth. Is that the sense in which you mean it? Like getting it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because drawdown is an ecological word now. It's part of the conversation. So you've got CO2 drawdown and intelligence drawdown. So, bring it down, stop being up in the air, stop having a big, jerk conversation about this, making it real, bringing it down.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So, yeah, I'm glad you put it in those terms because, for example, the concept of snack bar that we've talked about, and we've talked about a couple different ways in which we could use it. we've got the URL snack.bar, snac.bar, SNAC standing for Social Network of Awesome Communities, right? And the first, hey, sweetheart, the first idea for it was social network of actual conversations. Like, let's bring it down to earth and have an actual conversation about it, right? Awesome Communities came a little later with the idea that there's all these communities that are already in existence. We need to bring them together. That can be one really powerful access or vehicle to bringing people together. And in fact, I wrote about this extensively in the notes that I sent out in the email last night in preparation for this video. I didn't actually talk about that part on the video, but I talk about in the notes, I talk about networks of communities, and then networks of communities, and then, believe it or not, the singular network of networks of networks of communities. Honest to goodness, it's all written up there. And so but anyway, snack bar is just a way to bring it down to earth, right? You don't need to put on a tuxedo and get your shoes shined to go to a snack bar, right? At an exclusive restaurant in London, maybe you do, but not at a snack bar. At a snack bar, you can show up with a tank top, shorts, flip-flops, smelling like you just rolled out of bed after a long weekend of smoking and whatever else. It's all good at a snack bar. Anything goes. And so it's that notion, and the block party has that kind of similar feel. It's a party. This isn't an academic conference.
I can actually visualize the snack bar. On the menu, it's like farming, sanitation, housing, justice issues, So whatever your current interest is, just like if you prefer salads, you go to the salad bar. Here you go to the justice table, or you go to the farming table, or the permaculture table, or the sanitation table, and you draw whatever you need and you go and implement it wherever you are, outside your tiny house, or in your on your balcony, where you need to turn the walls of your balcony into a vertical garden, a food garden, sort of like, so it's very, and cafe culture has always been historically, intellectual, culture, hasn't it? An artistic culture. You look at Paris, Bohemian Paris. Cafe's great. There's something about a cafe.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I don't think it's any coincidence at all that really cool format that's known as the World Cafe format for collective conversation uses the term cafe. So I think snack bar is right on the mark. Social network of awesome communities. What constitutes an awesome community? A community that's in the conversation. Are you in the conversation? If so, we need you right here in the social network of awesome communities, where we're all coming together to mix it up and say, wow, I didn't know all you other awesome communities existed. I'm so glad we have a place to congregate, a place that awesome communities who are in the conversation, who get the imperatives that we need to feed everyone, that we need to cool the planet through SRM. Yeah, go ahead.
Shaman, the other day, as part of the Midnight Block Party, or whatever it was, I had a real taste of snack bar when the couple, somebody in Benjamin, the couple, I'm sorry, I can't remember both their names. Benjamin and Suzanne. I cannot tell you how excited I was. A real tiny house person who built their own tiny house, because I've got this issue of, like, instantly I thought, how many tiny houses can we fit into Al Gore's mansion? How many tiny houses can we fit into one of his bathrooms? And it's like, it's such a big issue with me. Waste of space, waste of energy. And so obviously I was really, really drawn. I don't live in I could probably fit about 4 tiny houses into my flat, which isn't a big flat, But I was just, that was so perfect for me. It was like I was able to hear from the horse's mouth people who'd built. It was so wonderful. I can't tell you how wonderful that was for me.
Beautiful. Yeah, because here you are having an actual conversation, real time, with two people who have built a tiny house inside their tiny house, giving you a virtual tour. I mean, this is the future. Now imagine that same process applied to windowsill gardening, rooftop gardening, indoor hydroponics, community gardens. Here, this is how we do it. Let me show you, right? And they show you. And you get to ask questions. Well, what about this? What about that? See, that's how we get to shared understanding very, very quickly through that process of sharing, open sharing. So for me, this is as obvious as the smartphone, right? And yet we don't have half a century to get there, right? We have maybe half a year at most to really fully be 100% in there. And, you know, like Emery said earlier, this is like a 007 movie. It's going to be like the last scene of a 007 movie. By the time we finally take on planetary overheating, it's going to be a hell of a game of chicken between these two Lamborghinis bearing down on each other at 200 miles an hour apiece, right? Who's going to go chicken? Who's going to prevail? Well, the sooner we start gearing up for it, the better our chances, quite frankly. And so that's why it's so early. That's why I stayed up until, well, I didn't go to bed till almost 6 a.m., but I was up till 3 a.m. just working on the video and then other writing after that to go with it. But I mean, we've got to do this now. It's now or never, right? We've got to get this down. So please share that video widely. Let me go ahead and paste the link here in the chat just for convenience. It's of course in the email that I sent out last night. Okay.
You know, Bill Gates has done some interesting work. I know he's like the big capitalist and squillionaire and all that, but he's done some interesting work on toilets and sanitation, him and Melinda. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not too big on billionaires, but the thing is that is a very interesting work. That I'm just, in terms of disease, you know, so many people get, so many children die from diarrhea, and it's all absolutely preventable. I think that's a really fabulous subject he's taken on for dealing with, you know, all the politics of Bill Gates and the links to the, you know, the big system and all that apart. That is just such a fundamental, pardon the pun, it's a fundamental subject.
Yeah, having worked for Bill Gates, I spoke with him about ending hunger and shared with him a proposal that I had for us to get involved and do something about that. And he was not the least bit interested. He's interested in investing in projects that don't require a lot of money, like malaria, like these composting toilets, stuff that you can tinker around and do some R&D in the lab where $1 million makes a difference. So he doesn't, you know, carve away too deeply from his stash. I mean, that's just how the guy's brain works. He's a hoarder. Al Gore is a hoarder.
Why do people money hoard? What's going on there? What, you know, Bill Gates is very close to his death. Is he a 60s guy? How old is he? Is he in his 70s?
Bill Gates is 65. He's 65.
Okay, so, you know, hoarding doesn't make a lot of sense when you're that age, does it? You know, you've only got so many kids you can pass on a bit of money to. So what is the whole issue with the hoarding thing? I don't get it.
Yeah, well, first of all, not only, if I'm not interrupting, not only do you've only got so many kids to pass it to, but when you plop that many billions of dollars in the lap of some kid who didn't have to work for it, right, or earn it in any way,
it's terrifying.
It's well known that you screw them up, That's
Well,
well,
all the Hollywood people, they won't give their kids any money because, you know, it's a huge percentage of kids would not be motivated after being given that. A few would, but most of them, it's like to have it totally given to them is just like a curse, an absolute curse.
absolutely, absolutely. So, so why do they hold on to it? And it's it has to do for me with attachment, ego, and addiction, and I've suffered from all three. And it's an addiction in this case to seeing your portfolio grow, right? I think it's kind of analogous to the farmer in all of us who is just fascinated to watch the plants grow. We're addicted to growth of our assets. We want growing assets that, you know, we're perhaps even hardwired for that at this point after so many generations since the dawn of the agricultural revolution. So between however we're wired and the game that we're born into that has nothing to do with our wiring, but everything to do with, you know, the culture that we were acclimated in, where we learned that, look, the name of the game is hoarding. They weren't so explicit about it, but see, that's one of the things about culture. It's the most powerful things are the ones that are unstated, that you just kind of infer from everyone's behavior. You know, we can infer from everyone's behavior that it's all about hoarding. That's the name of the game, if you look at it through a particular lens, right? And so the short answer is it's an addiction. Are we wired for it? Arguably, yes. But even though we're wired for it, doesn't mean that we're, you know, doomed to go down that path. In fact, I think it's urgent that, see, as part of the, I know I'm going down a couple of rat holes here, but let me just run with it since no one has their hand raised. Emery makes the point about preservation. There's two schools of thought. You can think your way into a new way of action, or you can act your way into a new way of thinking, right?
I thought it was interesting that Elon Musk, he recently spoke about giving away all his property. I think he meant his physical property. However, he didn't actually talk about giving away all the money, you know, all the, you know, clearing his bank accounts. He also, in the talk that I heard, there was quite a lot of fear involved. You know, the pitchforks are coming. There was quite a bit of the pitchforks are coming. People don't like it, you know. So, you know, maybe he feared ending up hiding in a bunker, you know, as is one of the possible scenarios. But I would have loved to interview him to go further, you know, because the person who interviewed him, right, stopped really short. But the person interviewing him was also a bit of a money hoarder. So it was a bit shallow, should we say.
Yeah, hoarders don't generally call each other out. It's sort of an unspoken, unwritten rule. And as far as the hoarding and the pitchforks and all that, and, you know, it's really interesting. You know, he's talking about giving away all his property. Mark Zuckerberg has said he's going to give away 99% of his wealth before he dies. Well, really, he believes in these biological research that's being done to prolong life indefinitely so that he'll never die, right? You know, Bill and Melinda Gates have talked about giving away half their wealth or whatever before they die. I don't know, whatever, 90%, whatever. But these are all shell games. The starving people need the food now, not in 100 years.
But you know, Jamin, somebody on here, and I was quite scathing, I must admit, mentioned Jeff Bezos and Amazon as a call on Jeff Bezos because he's amazing. And I went away and I thought, okay, don't be scathing, listen. What is this person saying? But the actual setup of Amazon delivering all these parcels to people's doors, that could just as easily be delivering the food to people's doors. It's a clever network. It's a genius network, but it's what it's used for is the problem, not the network. He's come up with a smart network, but he's not using it. He's using it for profit, personal profit, you know, enrichment of the one rather than feeding the many, which is what we're interested in.
Exactly. Yeah. And so where I was going with that whole thing about, you know, it's really the, you know, the ultimate form of virtuous signaling, saying, oh, I'm going to give away all my wealth. Therefore, that makes me good, or I'm thinking about it. I'm planning to do it. Right. But it reminds me of, there was a quote from the 90s about how China under Deng Xiaoping was, you know, really transitioning to capitalism. But, you know, they're supposedly a communist country, the big communist country, right? Biggest communist country on earth, etc. So what's with all this capitalism? And so there's a joke. So Deng Xiaoping is being driven by his chauffeur in some fancy Chinese car in Beijing, and they're going down the road, and they hit a T intersection, a T. You can only go left or right, right? And the chauffeur says to, you know, Deng Xiaoping, Mr. Chairman, what shall I do, right? Is it left or right? And here's what Deng Xiaoping says to his chauffeur. Signal left, but turn right.
Amusing.
Huh?
Very amusing. Very amusing.
Yeah. And so the billionaires, it's become kind of like the latest fetish of the billionaires, virtuous signaling. Signal that you're going to give away your wealth, but then hold on to it. Right? That's like dangling food in front of the starving. But it's become a fetish.
You know, there's more than the money fetish. There's money is power. You know, maybe it's clinging to the power. Because you've got that much money, there's so much you can do with it. You can change the world for good, you can change the world for bad, you can do all kinds of things, but you have the power rests with you, that billionaire. And I've never had a huge amount. I did have a little bit of power once, yeah, and I chose not to exploit it. But I don't really know anything about having that level of power, what it feels like. They say it's like a drug, but not having experienced it to that level, I don't know.
Yeah, it is like a drug, and it's something that I don't believe we really can be or should be responsible for. We simply shouldn't have that level of concentration of power. We need to be a community again, you know, and communities form kind of around natural, you know, segmenting of the earth, for lack of a better word, right? So if there's a mountain range here, it kind of makes sense that the valley on the west and the valley on the east become two different communities with potentially different cultures and whatnot, depending on various factors. So there's that natural division by natural geographical segmentation, we could call it that. But in terms of segmentation, it's now quite clear. It's one world, one planet that we're all contributing to the exponential overheating of. And if we're going to stop that exponential overheating, we need to do it together. By the way, please tell me if there's any issues with the audio. It's getting a little windy here. I can always move.
No, it's okay. But Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are going down too. They're going down too. They're trying to not go down. They're trying to go up in space, but that's not working great at the moment. So they're going down too. So ultimately, their level of stupidity has got to hit them in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally waiting for all those folks and everyone to show up right here and join us in the conversation. and say, hey, we're here, better late than never. Let's roll up our sleeves and do this. Let's figure it out, right? And I think what they're afraid of, see, when you start to accumulate a lot of money, you start to your kind of separation from the world it gets worse and worse, because you feel like you have it all under your own control, under your own power, and you don't really need other people. You don't need community, right? You're living in this big mansion. You know, you've got everything at your fingertips, just press buttons. Now you've got it all integrated through apps on your phone, temperature, music, whatever you want. It's all in the palm of your hands. You just like this, you kind of start to feel like you're just master of your own universe. And it's, of course, it's all an illusion. Go for it, Emery. Yes.
It's want to ask you a question about figuring stuff out, you know. And my question is, how will society, how will the population figure out when to take off the mask? You know, how are they going to figure that one out? I mean, the forces that play against that are so tremendous, you know. I mean, we're projected to feed the whole world, okay? We're gonna feed everybody, right? But there's the lingering issue of, well, everybody's been programmed now to mask it, you know.
Henry,
So
did you
how are we gonna figure it out? How are people gonna figure that out? To put
Henry,
the mask away and take the consequences of, you know, having a community again in a normalized fashion, you know. That's a hard leap now. Who are you going to trust? Because you're going to have to trust. Someone's going to have to be trusted. And the trust issue is a big factor now, because it's been obliterated in many sectors. The trust that people had once for institutions and things like that, and people of high profile, right? It's been obliterated. You know, it's knee to the neck. You know, put the knee to the neck and do what you're told, right? And it's coming down the line that you're gonna have to do it or die, right? That's the programming. Do it or die. And
Emery, you talked about masks. Have you seen the Martin Scorsese film of Rolling Thunder, Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder tour? And there's this little moment in the film where Martin Scorsese asks about how the performers were using masks. And Bob Dylan replies with, "Do you think anyone's ever going to tell the truth if they haven't got a mask on? You have to have a mask in order to tell the truth," was basically what he said. So I haven't come to any conclusions about what you said. There are masks and there are masks. You know, there are masks that might be 10 masks thick, and they must be bad masks, you know. But if it's just one mask covering you know, protecting you, and so that you can tell the truth, that might be a good mask.
I'm talking about the COVID mask, the mask to protect you from the virus. That's what I'm talking about. I'm sure you can have the conversation of other things that are masked, yeah. But I'm talking about the issue now of distancing, social distancing, and and being forced into a box of do it or you're dead. You know? So when are we going to figure that one out? And how do we go about figuring it out? And who are we going to trust? Okay? Who will we trust? It's a big question.
What I'm proposing is that we trust in ourselves as a collective superintelligence, but in ourselves well organized, right? You know, if you put the Brazilian national soccer team on the field against, say, El Salvador, I expect Brazil to win, but only if they're in the right configuration, right? If they get out there on the field, right, and every Brazilian player has a wallet in their back pocket with cash in it, and I don't know the names of the players now, but if, you know, Garrincha is saying to Pele, hey, pass me the ball so I can do this play, and Pele says, okay, I'll pass it to you, but how much are you going to pay me? And then they actually have to have that transaction, a monetary transaction, before anyone passes the ball, El Salvador will run circles around them. They'll be finished before they start. You know, it's ridiculous. So right now we're in the wrong configuration. We need to get into the right configuration. Collective superintelligence is the right configuration. Put us in collective superintelligence, I trust humanity. As long as we're not in that configuration, I don't trust us. In fact, I have the opposite of trust. I trust that we'll continue to go down in an accelerating death spiral. Put us in the right configuration, and I trust that we'll get out of the death spiral. So, humanity, it's time to come into formation. We're proposing a specific way to do that through the 35-minute video, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? The one that we just played. And, you know, we're open to talking about other possible configurations, but let's have the conversation about configuration and goal and strategy, mega strategy, pathway, detour, direct, indirect, whatever. Let's have the conversation and figure it out. I'm not talking to the people in this room. I'm talking to the people who are not in this room, saying, please join us. We need you here.
Sometimes we get stuck into a what we can't do list. And you just got to hop over into the can-do list, because the can't-do list is forever and it always stops things happening. You know, there's critical thinking, but the can't-do list isn't actually critical thinking. It's just stuckness. It's stuck in the mudness. And we've all got it. We've all got it in our heads. You know, we go, oh, I can't do this. My big can't-do area is making a fool of myself. I'm like terrible for that, because I'm easily embarrassed. I'm easily shamed. So like when I'm about to do something that's good and it's, you know, creative and it's good, this can't do list of mine always says like, oh, you can make a right twit of yourself. You know, like you can't do that. It's totally mad. You can't do that. That's my can't do list. We've all got a separate can't do list, but forget the can't do list. You've got to leap over into can do list.
Yeah. In fact, a friend of mine, she once said that voice in her head that says, oh, you can't do, oh, you're not good enough, whatever. She calls it her itty bitty shitty committee. Her itty bitty shitty committee, because it helps keep her small and itty bitty and feeling shitty about herself and that she can't do and can't do and can't do. So by giving it a name, see, if you can name your enemy, if you can identify your enemy, that gives you a huge advantage in whatever battle you're in, right? So she names her enemy, and like another friend of mine, we all did this education together. So called landmark education, if you've heard of it. It used to be called EST back in the 70s, EST. But anyway, another friend of mine, see, because it's a voice in her head, and she's given that voice a name. She gives it the name Courtney. So she talks to Courtney and she says, no, thank you, Courtney. I'm not going to listen to you today, etc. So if you can name it and then address it, you know, that's half the battle or more. And that's really what we're doing right here in these long format conversations. We're naming the enemy and we're addressing it square in the face. The enemy is our collective stupidity, and the antidote is collective superintelligence. And with what I presented in the 35-minute video today, it's really what we presented, because it took a village to raise that video, right? It's all of us. What we presented in that video today provides, you know, what I simply call a mega strategy for getting to collective superintelligence. So if we need to become collectively superintelligent before we can fix all this, and I believe we do, how do we become collectively superintelligent? The project of feeding everyone. It's not like the project for feeding everyone happens first and then we become collectively superintelligent. The two co-evolve like a double helix, like a DNA molecule. You've got this co-evolution of the project of feeding everyone with the project of building collective superintelligence, right? Going on mute. So the way I see it, what I would like to propose to all of us for consideration is that a path forward, perhaps the best at this point, is if we all like that basic story of what's in the 35-minute video, let's make it better. Let's get it down to 5 minutes. Let's say, boom, here's the idea. Something that can go viral as a proposed, you know, mega strategy. And you see, but one of the things that's kind of keeping us back is we don't even know, you know, do we call it a mega strategy, a hyper solution, a solve the world's problems kind of thing? You know, what do we call it? Super intelligent, you know, what do we call this strategy? Since there isn't really a name for it, there's really not a place in people's minds where that exists, right? You tell people about getting a job, up, yep, they know what you mean. Money, yep, I know what that is. Yep, corporation, yep. Government, you know, yep. Lobbying, yep. Military industrial, you know. So we have all these places in our mind for things that exist that we know about. This is something that doesn't yet exist. And see, that's part of kind of the visionary's dilemma, is how do I bring this down to earth so that everyone can understand it? And see, that's where we're using, frankly, a bit of a trick in getting the initial focus on feeding everyone, which on the surface really has nothing to do with collective superintelligence. But then in that process, we act our way into a new level of thinking, which enables us now to think bigger and broader and to think in terms of collective superintelligence. But it's really a co-evolution in my mind. Anyway, going on mute.
Well, just going on what you said there about what would you call it? I suppose we're working on strategies and trying to build on strategies, and they don't exist yet. So therefore, they're future strategies. That's basically it. Like, we're working on future strategies. Like, simple and plain. And it's complicated. I don't know how we're going to bring that 35 minutes. Well, yeah, you can bring it down and condense it more. But it was already condensed for us in a sense, because there's such a vast array of subjects in there. Like, so I don't know how we'd condense it down to 5 minutes anyway to get the average person on the street to understand it. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, we can still work on that. The way I see it is, again, going back to the fact that we just need more heads in the conversation for one. But while we don't have the heads and while we're waiting for the heads, we can be working on these strategies anyway to try and, evolve on them, better them, work on them more, develop them better, whatever. At least that when the number of staff arriving, we have, plans that can be built on, like, rather than just stewing, like. But at the moment, I think our biggest plan is, our biggest dilemma is getting the numbers in here. I hate reiterating it, but that is it really. At the end of the day, like, none of it's going to work without people, without heads in the conversation. Like.
It feels to me like we're on a really good path here. It feels to me like we're about to make the final climb to the top of Mount Everest. We're at base camp. We're in a big tent, and all the gear is scattered on the floor, right? You got cooking gear over here, oxygen masks over there, this, that, whatever, it's all scattered. And we're like, oh boy, okay, we got to put this all together. But listen to this. The good news is that everything we need is there in the tent. We just need to get it together, right? And it feels to me like what we need to get together right now is the story. The 35-minute video is a first pass, a first attempt at the story, right? And we now have an opportunity to take that to the next level.
Jamin.
Yes, sir.
Could I share like 2 minutes of, I told you that through this conversation, I've been talking about to the Black Lives Matter protest, the plant food. So the two Extinction Rebellion vegans who are part of Animal Rebellion, and they're putting out these little videos how to cook plant-based food, and they had live comments, and I said, how about taking the food to the protest? There's one coming up tomorrow, a Black Lives Matter protest. How about taking it? And there's a moment when she reads out in the middle of the video what I said in the comments. Can I share that?
Please. Do you want to screen share, or do you want to put the link in the chat and I can screen share? Either way.
I'll screen share it. So it says share screen.
And then remember to click on share computer sound or something, whatever it says there, the checkbox in the lower left.
I don't know how to do it. Okay, I'll hand it over to you. Right.
Yeah, you can just give me the link and I'll share it here.
Okay. Okay. I'll put the link. I'm not doing very well here. Sorry, it's disappeared. I'll do it later on.
Yeah, no problem. No hurry. Whenever it's good for you. All righty. Well, I say we pause recording for a moment.